I always thought Rebecca and I had the kind of marriage other couples envied. We weren't perfect, but who is? We met in college, dated for 3 years, and tied the knot in an autumn ceremony surrounded by falling leaves and our closest friends. We had our little routines: Sunday morning coffee runs, Friday movie nights, and volunteering at the local charity Rebecca adored. That charity was HopeWorks, a community initiative run by Philip, a charismatic older man in his mid-50s. He'd been like a second father to me since my teenage years. My own dad was absent, and Philip stepped in to mentor me. He was the one who encouraged me to pursue my career in IT and even helped Rebecca get her first job out of college. I owed him everything, or so I thought. At first, the signs didn't register as anything unusual. Rebecca had always been passionate about HopeWorks, but lately, she was spending more and more time there. "Philip's overwhelmed," she'd say. "He needs help coordinating the fundraiser." She'd head out for long evenings at the office, often coming back smelling of the cinnamon rolls Philip always kept stocked in the staff kitchen. I didn't think much of it. I trusted her. I trusted him. Then came the changes. Rebecca, who normally didn't care much about appearances, started dressing up more, subtly at first, like wearing perfume to the charity events. I joked that she was trying to impress the donors. She laughed it off. But when the late nights became weekend trips to plan with Philip, I couldn't help but feel a twinge of unease. I brushed it aside. She wouldn't lie to me. Not Rebecca. But then, one night, I woke up to find her gone from our bed. It was 2 a.m., and her phone buzzed on the nightstand. I glanced at the screen out of curiosity. It was a message from Philip. "Can't stop thinking about tonight. You're incredible." My stomach dropped. For a few seconds, I convinced myself it was a misunderstanding, a professional compliment, something innocent. But deep down, something darker took root. I put her phone back and stared at the ceiling until she returned. She slipped into bed without a word, her hair damp, smelling faintly of cinnamon and something else, something I couldn't name yet. For the first time in our 10 years together, I began to question everything. I spent the next few days in a haze, replaying that message in my mind. Every time Rebecca smiled at me or kissed me goodbye, I wondered if it was real or just part of a well-practiced lie. But I didn't confront her. Not yet. I needed to be sure. Instead, I started paying closer attention. I noticed how she always angled her phone screen away from me when she texted. How she took extra care to lock her phone, something she never used to bother with. And then there were the excuses. "I'll be home late tonight. Philip needs me to finalize the auction catalog. Philip wants me to review some donor profiles this weekend. Philip this, Philip that." It was always Philip. One evening, as she sat at the dining table tapping away on her laptop, I casually asked, "How's Philip holding up with all this fundraiser stress?" She barely looked up. "He's fine. Busy as always. Seems like you're the one holding the whole thing together." Her fingers paused on the keyboard, just for a second. "We're a team," she said lightly, but her tone lacked the usual warmth. That pause, it was small, fleeting, but it spoke volumes. Later that night, while she showered, I tried something I'd never done before. I checked her laptop. My hands were trembling as I opened her email, half hoping to find nothing, half expecting the worst. But the inbox was clean, too clean. Every sent email, every message in her trash. It was all gone. My heart sank. Who deletes everything unless they have something to hide? That's when it hit me. Rebecca wasn't just lying to me. She was careful. She was calculated. And whatever she was hiding, she was doing everything she could to keep it buried. But now I had to know. I wasn't going to sit in the dark any longer. The next day, I decided to skip work. Rebecca thought I was at the office when she left in the morning, dressed sharp and wearing that perfume she only used on charity days. Instead, I parked my car a block away and waited. Sure enough, she didn't go to the HopeWorks office downtown. She drove right past it, heading toward the upscale side of town. I followed, careful to keep a few cars between us. My heart was pounding, and my palms were slick against the steering wheel. I told myself I'd turn back if she stopped somewhere reasonable, like a donor's house or a coffee shop for a meeting. She didn't. Rebecca pulled into the driveway of a large, gated house I'd never seen before, the kind of place you'd expect a millionaire to own. My breath hitched as I watched her step out of the car, smoothing her dress and fixing her hair before ringing the doorbell. The door opened, and there he was, Philip, dressed casually in a button-down shirt and slacks. He greeted her with a hug, the kind that lingered a little too long. My stomach turned. I didn't know what I expected, but watching them disappear inside together confirmed every fear I'd tried to bury. This wasn't just a professional relationship. Whatever this was, it was personal. I stayed parked there for almost an hour, staring at the house, trying to figure out my next move. Confronting her then and there felt impulsive, reckless. If I stormed in without proof, she'd just deny everything, make me feel crazy for even suspecting it. No, I needed more. I needed undeniable evidence. Driving home, my mind raced with ideas. That's when it hit me. If she was careful enough to delete emails, she probably wasn't careless enough to leave a trail on her phone. But Philip? He might not be as cautious. That night, while Rebecca slept soundly beside me, I started digging online. It didn't take long to figure out that Philip's charity website ran on an outdated server. One with vulnerabilities I could exploit. If Rebecca and Philip thought they were clever, they were about to find out just how wrong they were. The next evening, Rebecca left again, claiming another late night at Hopeworks. I didn't even ask questions this time. I wanted her to think I was oblivious. As soon as her car pulled out of the driveway, I fired up my laptop. Breaking into Philip's email server wasn't difficult. I'd worked in cybersecurity for years, and Philip had practically left the door open with his outdated systems. Within an hour, I was in. His inbox was overflowing with donor emails, event planning threads, and newsletters, but I wasn't looking for that. A quick keyword search, Rebecca's name, pulled up everything I needed. There were emails, all right, dozens of them. Last night was amazing. I can still taste you. I can't wait to see you again this weekend. Bring that black dress I love. You're incredible, Rebecca. I wish we could just leave it all behind. Each one felt like a dagger to the chest. The timestamps confirmed it had been going on for months, maybe longer. As I scrolled, I found attachments too, photos. Nothing explicit, but enough to make my blood boil. Rebecca smiling at his side during a private dinner, the two of them in a cozy booth at some high-end restaurant. She was laughing, glowing in a way I hadn't seen in years. And then the final gut punch, an itinerary for a weekend getaway. They were planning to leave the following Friday. A beachside villa, booked in both their names. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. The woman I had built a life with wasn't just cheating on me. She was planning a future with this man. But the anger I felt wasn't blind rage. It was cold, calculated fury. If Rebecca and Philip thought they could play me, they were about to learn just how wrong they were. I downloaded everything, emails, photos, receipts. Enough evidence to expose them both. I wasn't just going to confront her. I was going to destroy the life they'd built behind my back. For the next few days, I played my role as the clueless husband to perfection. Rebecca came home late every night, offering me half-hearted excuses about donor meetings and emergency fund issues. I smiled, nodded, and asked her how I could help. She didn't suspect a thing. Meanwhile, I worked quietly in the background. Using the information I'd gathered from Philip's emails, I started to dismantle their lives piece by piece. I created a fake donor profile, a wealthy philanthropist interested in partnering with Hopeworks. I used a burner email to send Philip a message that I knew he wouldn't be able to resist. Dear Mr. Masters, I'm deeply impressed by the work your organization does, and I would love to contribute in a significant way. Perhaps we could discuss this over dinner? My assistant can coordinate with you directly. The bait was simple, and within hours, Philip responded eagerly. He'd set up a meeting for the following Tuesday at a fancy restaurant downtown. Perfect. While I laid that trap for Philip, I also began isolating Rebecca. I subtly altered the Wi-Fi settings at home to reroute her browsing history to my own server. It wasn't long before I saw her searching for how to tell your husband you're leaving and divorce lawyer confidentiality. I felt a pang of bitterness reading those searches, but I didn't let it derail me. If she was planning her escape, she was going to find herself trapped instead. On Thursday night, as she was getting ready for one of her so-called meetings, I casually asked, "Do you want me to come by the fundraiser on Friday? I could help with the setup." Her reaction was exactly what I expected. "Oh no, honey," she said quickly, not even looking up from the mirror as she applied her lipstick. "It's a small event, really just Philip and me handling logistics. You'd be bored out of your mind." I nodded, pretending to accept her excuse. Rebecca had no idea that I already knew she wouldn't be at the office on Friday night, or that I planned to follow her to the villa. The trap was almost set. Now, it was just a matter of springing it at the perfect moment. Part 6. The villa. Friday evening arrived, and Rebecca was all smiles as she left the house. She wore the black dress Philip had requested in his email, along with a silk scarf I'd never seen before. "Don't wait up," she said with a quick peck on my cheek. I waited 10 minutes before grabbing my car keys and heading out. I'd already tracked the location of the villa using the itinerary Philip had emailed her. It was a 2-hour drive, tucked away along the coastline, secluded and private, perfect for an illicit getaway. As I pulled into the long driveway, the house loomed in the moonlight. Luxury oozed from every corner. Manicured gardens, massive windows, and a sleek car parked in the driveway. Philip's car. Parking down the road, I grabbed my equipment. A camera, a digital recorder, and my laptop. I wasn't there just to spy. I was there to gather ironclad evidence. The villa had a side path leading to the back, where I found a patio with glass doors. I crouched low, peering inside. Rebecca and Philip were seated on the plush couch, laughing over glasses of wine. She leaned into him, her hand resting on his thigh. The intimacy made my stomach churn, but I forced myself to stay focused. I set up the camera at a discreet angle, ensuring it captured everything. As they moved closer, Rebecca tilted her head toward Philip, and they kissed. A deep, unrestrained kiss that left no doubt about what was happening. I clenched my jaw, the betrayal hitting me like a wave. But I stayed calm. This wasn't the time for confrontation. I recorded every moment of their interactions. Rebecca leaning against Philip, her laugh as she whispered something in his ear, his hands sliding over her waist. It was sickening to watch, but this was the evidence I needed. When they eventually disappeared into the bedroom, I stopped the recording. I wasn't interested in catching more than I already had. What I had was enough to destroy them both. I packed up my equipment and drove home, my mind racing. The footage was incriminating, but it wasn't just for me. It was time for their secrets to come crashing down in front of everyone they cared about. The charity gala was in 2 weeks, a night when both Rebecca and Philip would be surrounded by their peers, donors, and friends. I couldn't imagine a better stage for my revenge. In the days leading up to the gala, I poured every ounce of energy into planning my revenge. It wasn't enough to simply expose them. I wanted their betrayal to reverberate through every corner of their lives. First, I edited the footage I'd recorded at the villa, cutting it into a short, devastating highlight reel. It started with Rebecca arriving at the villa, followed by their intimate dinner, and ending with that damning kiss on the couch. I didn't include anything too graphic, but it was enough to make their relationship crystal clear. Then, I hacked into HopeWorks' internal systems. It was shockingly easy. Philip hadn't updated his passwords in years. I created a series of scheduled emails using their official donor list, set to send during the gala. Each email would include the footage, accompanied by a message. Transparency matters in charity. This is the kind of leadership HopeWorks is built on. The goal wasn't just to humiliate them, but to dismantle the facade they'd built. Philip's reputation as a beloved community leader would crumble, and Rebecca would be forever tied to the fallout. The final piece of the plan was the gala itself. I RSVP'd as Rebecca's husband, ensuring I'd be there to witness the chaos firsthand. I wanted to see the looks on their faces when the truth came out. To complete my preparations, I printed copies of every incriminating email and text I'd found. I compiled them into a folder labeled, "For distribution." These were my backup plan in case anything went wrong with the digital exposure. On the surface, I kept up appearances. I was the picture of calm, going to work and chatting casually with Rebecca when she came home. She had no idea that I was counting down the days until everything she'd hidden would be laid bare. The night of the gala arrived sooner than I expected, and as I put on my suit, I couldn't help but feel a surge of anticipation. By the end of the evening, Rebecca and Philip's world would come crashing down. The gala was held in a grand ballroom at the city's most prestigious hotel. Chandeliers sparkled overhead, and the room buzzed with laughter and clinking glasses as donors mingled with staff and volunteers. It was the kind of event Rebecca lived for, elegant, high-profile, and full of influential people. When we arrived, she was radiant, dressed in a sleek emerald gown that turned heads as we walked in. She smiled at everyone, her charm on full display. Philip greeted us at the entrance, his handshake firm, his grin broad. "Adam, so glad you could make it," he said, clasping my shoulder. "Rebecca's been incredible as always, pulling everything together. Couldn't do it without her." I forced a smile, my fingers itching to wipe that smug look off his face. Of course, she's always been dedicated. As we entered the ballroom, Rebecca excused herself to handle last-minute details, leaving me alone in a sea of tuxedos and evening gowns. I grabbed a drink and waited. My pulse was steady, my resolve unwavering. The program began an hour in. Philip took the stage, delivering a speech about the importance of community, trust, and integrity. The irony wasn't lost on me. Rebecca stood nearby, applauding enthusiastically as he spoke. When the applause died down, I excused myself and slipped into the hallway, pulling out my phone. It was time. I activated the scheduled email blast, and the countdown began. 5 minutes. That was all it would take for the footage and emails to reach every person in the room with an inbox. I returned to the ballroom just as the dessert course was being served. First, nothing happened. People were still chatting, their laughter filling the room. Then, slowly, the mood shifted. Phones buzzed. Conversations faltered. Eyes darted toward Rebecca and Philip, who were still blissfully unaware of the storm brewing around them. "What's going on?" Rebecca whispered to a colleague, her brow furrowing as she noticed the stares. Philip's phone buzzed too, and he glanced at it casually. The moment his eyes landed on the screen, his face went pale. "Philip?" I called out, loud enough for the room to hear. "Is something wrong?" He looked up at me, his expression a mix of panic and fury. Rebecca grabbed her phone, her hands shaking as she scrolled through her inbox. "Adam, what did you do?" she hissed, her voice low but sharp. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. The damage was done, and the room was already abuzz with murmurs and pointed looks. I grabbed a glass of champagne from a passing waiter and raised it slightly, meeting her gaze with a cold smile. "To transparency," I said, and walked out of the room. I left the gala and sat in my car across the street, watching from a distance. The chaos inside the ballroom was palpable even through the large glass windows. People were staring at their phones, murmuring to each other. Rebecca and Philip were in the center of it, scrambling as the walls of their carefully constructed world collapsed. It didn't take long for the first call to come through. Rebecca's name lit up on my phone screen, but I let it ring out. Then came the texts, a flurry of panicked messages. "Rebecca. Adam, where are you? Rebecca, what did you do? Rebecca, please answer me." I didn't respond. Instead, I turned my phone off and drove home, leaving her to deal with the fallout. When I got there, I poured myself a drink and settled into the living room, savoring the silence. This house, our house, suddenly felt lighter without her presence, as though the air itself was reclaiming space she no longer deserved. By the time Rebecca came home, it was well past midnight. She stormed in, her makeup smeared, her face red with anger and humiliation. "What the hell did you do?" she screamed, slamming the door behind her. I didn't bother to stand. "I showed the world what you and Philip have been up to," I said calmly, swirling the amber liquid in my glass. "You're welcome." She looked at me like I was a stranger. "You humiliated me. You humiliated us. Do you have any idea what you've done to our lives?" I laughed bitterly, setting my glass down. Oh, I know exactly what I've done. I've exposed the lies, the deceit. You and Philip thought you could make a fool out of me. Now the whole world knows who the real fools are. Her expression shifted from anger to desperation. Adam, please, we can fix this. It wasn't what you think. It was just a mistake, a lapse in judgment. I stood, my voice icy. A mistake? A lapse in judgment? Don't insult me, Rebecca. I've seen the emails, the photos, the weekend getaways. That's not a mistake. That's a choice. Over and over again, you chose him. Tears welled in her eyes, but I felt nothing.
Adam, I'm sorry.
I didn't mean for it to go this far. I love you. Please, let's talk about this. I shook my head, disgusted. It's too late for apologies. Too late for love. Pack your things, Rebecca. You're done here. She stared at me, as if trying to gauge whether I was serious. When she realized I was, she broke into sobs, pleading with me. But I didn't waver. That night, Rebecca packed a suitcase and left. As the door closed behind her, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. It wasn't over, not yet. But it was the beginning of the end for both her and Philip. The next morning, the aftermath of the gala was all over social media and local news outlets. HopeWorks donors, staff, and volunteers had received the footage and emails, and some of them weren't content to keep it private. Screenshots were posted online, hashtags trended, and even local reporters started sniffing around. Philip's pristine reputation crumbled overnight. The man who had been hailed as a paragon of virtue was now branded a fraud and a philanderer. By noon, HopeWorks released a statement announcing Philip's resignation, citing personal reasons. Rebecca wasn't spared either. While her name wasn't explicitly mentioned in the organization's response, it didn't matter. Everyone knew. Her face was plastered across social media, tagged in posts calling her a homewrecker, a liar, and worse. I watched it all unfold from the comfort of my home, scrolling through the chaos I'd unleashed. Part of me felt vindicated, but there was another part, small but undeniable, that felt hollow. Years of trust, love, and shared memories had been reduced to this. A public scandal that would haunt us both for the rest of our lives. It didn't take long for Rebecca to reach out again. She called first, but I let it ring. Then came the texts. Rebecca, Adam, we need to talk. Rebecca, please, I know I hurt you, but you're destroying my life. Rebecca, I'll do whatever it takes. Just talk to me. Her desperation was obvious, but I wasn't interested in hearing her excuses. Not yet. Instead, I focused on Philip. I wasn't done with him. Using the same hacked email account, I dug deeper into his financial records. I found evidence of misappropriated funds, donor money that had been funneled into private accounts. It wasn't just an affair that would ruin him now. It was embezzlement. I compiled the evidence into a neat, damning package and sent it anonymously to a local journalist known for exposing corruption. Within hours, I saw the first headline appear online. HopeWorks hero or fraud? The scandal surrounding Philip Masters. By the end of the day, Philip's world wasn't just in shambles. It was on fire. And Rebecca? She was next. Rebecca showed up at the house that evening. I heard her car pull into the driveway and footsteps approach the door. Before I could decide whether to let her in, she started banging. Adam, open the door. Please. I hesitated, but curiosity got the better of me. I opened it to find her standing there, disheveled, her makeup smeared, and her eyes puffy from crying. We need to talk, she said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. I didn't stop her. Instead, I crossed my arms and leaned against the wall. What could you possibly have to say? She turned to face me, her hands trembling. I know what I did was wrong. I know I hurt you. But you didn't just punish me, you ruined everything. My reputation, my career, everything I worked for. I raised an eyebrow. You mean everything we worked for? While you were sneaking off to your lover's villa, I was busy trusting you, Rebecca. You burned it all down, not me. Her voice cracked. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. I didn't mean for it to go so far with Philip. It started as something small, something stupid. And then I couldn't stop. I scoffed, the bitterness rising. Couldn't stop? You had every chance to stop, Rebecca. Every late-night meeting, every kiss, every lie you told when you came home smelling like him. You chose this. Over and over again. She collapsed onto the couch, burying her face in her hands. I'm sorry, she whispered. I don't even know who I am anymore. I stayed silent for a moment, watching her crumble. A part of me, a very small part, felt the faintest twinge of pity. But it wasn't enough to soften the iron resolve in my chest. Rebecca, I said, my voice cold and steady. You're not here because you're sorry. You're here because you've lost. Philip's done. You're done. And now you're crawling back to me because you have nowhere else to go. She looked up, her eyes pleading. I'm here because I love you, Adam. I made a mistake, but I still love you. The words hung in the air, heavy and hollow. I shook my head, the final thread of whatever feelings I had left snapping in that moment. No, Rebecca. If you loved me, this never would have happened. Love doesn't lie, cheat, and destroy everything in its path. She reached for me, but I stepped back. It's over, I said firmly. You need to leave. Don't come back here. Don't call me. Just go. Her face crumpled, and for a moment, I thought she might argue. But then she stood, brushing tears from her cheeks. Goodbye, Adam, she said softly, her voice barely audible. I watched her walk out the door without a word, and when it closed behind her, I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks. Peace. But my revenge wasn't finished. Not yet. After Rebecca left, I knew she wouldn't give up completely. People like her don't just accept defeat, they try to claw their way back. That's why I'd prepared one final move, a trump card she wouldn't see coming. I spent the next 2 days gathering the last pieces of evidence from the digital trail she and Philip had left behind. Among the emails and receipts, I found something damning. A private correspondence between Rebecca and Philip outlining plans to siphon funds from a recent charity drive. The scheme was simple but bold. They had inflated the operational expenses of a fundraising campaign and pocketed the surplus. It was small enough to slip under the radar but large enough to be illegal. This wasn't just betrayal, it was a crime. I compiled the evidence into a new dossier, complete with annotated screenshots, timelines, and financial discrepancies. Then I sent it to 3 places. 1. The board of directors at HopeWorks. 2. The same journalist who was already covering Philip's fall from grace. 3. A police detective I knew specialized in white-collar crimes. Within hours, the firestorm reignited. HopeWorks released another statement, this time distancing itself entirely from Rebecca, citing serious allegations of misconduct. Social media exploded with speculation. Rebecca's name was now tied not just to infidelity but to financial fraud, a stain that wouldn't wash off. That evening, she called again, but this time I picked up. What the hell is wrong with you, Adam? She screamed, her voice raw with anger and panic. You've ruined my life. Do you have any idea what you've done? I know exactly what I've done, I said calmly. I held a mirror up to your actions, Rebecca. You're the one who chose this path. You could have just divorced me, she cried. You didn't have to destroy me. I let out a bitter laugh. Destroy you? You destroyed yourself. I just made sure everyone else could see the truth. For a moment, there was silence on the other end of the line. Then her tone shifted, quieter, almost pleading. Adam, please, I'll do anything to fix this. Just tell me what you want. What I wanted. I wanted her out of my life, out of my head, out of the wreckage she'd created. What I want, I said slowly, is for you to face the consequences of your choices. And that's exactly what's going to happen. Goodbye, Rebecca. I hung up and blocked her number, knowing there was nothing left to say. The next morning, headlines splashed across the news. HopeWorks scandal. Financial fraud allegations emerge. Rebecca and Philip's faces were everywhere, their names synonymous with disgrace. And I, for the first time in months, felt a sense of closure. But I wasn't finished yet. There was one last person who needed to know the truth, and it was someone Rebecca never expected me to contact. I knew the final piece of the puzzle lay with someone who deserved to know the full extent of Rebecca's betrayal. Her parents. Rebecca had always painted her family as a pillar of virtue, people she respected and admired. And I knew they admired her, or thought they did. Over the years, I'd grown close to her mother, Susan, and her father, Henry. They were the kind of in-laws who treated me like their own son. I could only imagine how shattered they'd be when they learned what their daughter had done. That afternoon I called Susan. She answered on the second ring, her voice warm but tinged with concern. "Adam? Is everything all right? You don't usually call during the day." "Susan, I need to talk to you and Henry," I said, keeping my tone measured. "It's about Rebecca. Can I come over?" There was a pause, then an anxious, "Of course. Is she okay?" I didn't answer directly. "I'll explain everything when I get there." When I arrived, they welcomed me in, but the atmosphere was heavy. Henry poured me a glass of water as I sat across from them in their cozy living room. "Adam," Susan started, her hands wringing nervously. "What's going on? Is Rebecca in trouble?" I took a deep breath and handed them the folder I'd prepared, a condensed version of the evidence. "You should see for yourselves." They opened it, their expressions shifting from confusion to shock as they read through the emails, saw the photos, and skimmed the details of the financial fraud. Susan covered her mouth with her hand, her eyes wide with disbelief. "This can't be true," she whispered. "Rebecca wouldn't. She wouldn't do something like this." "I wish it weren't true," I said quietly. "But she did. She's been having an affair with Philip, stealing from the charity, and lying to everyone, including you." Henry set the folder down, his jaw clenched. "How long have you known?" "About the affair?" "A few weeks." "About the fraud?" "A few days. I wanted to make sure you knew before this becomes even more public." Susan started to cry, tears streaming down her face. "Why would she do this? Why?" "I don't know," I admitted. "But I thought you deserved to hear it from me, not from the news." Henry's face was a mask of fury, his voice tight with barely controlled rage. "She's humiliated you, humiliated all of us. And for what? That smug bastard Philip?" I nodded. "I'm divorcing her. But I thought you should know what's coming. The fraud investigation is already underway. Rebecca, she's going to face consequences." Susan sobbed harder, while Henry put a protective arm around her. For the first time, I felt a pang of guilt. Not for Rebecca, but for the collateral damage. "You didn't deserve this," I said softly. "Neither of you." Henry looked at me, his expression hard but grateful. "Thank you for telling us, Adam. We'll deal with her. You've done more than enough." As I left their house, I felt lighter somehow. The truth was out, and Rebecca's last source of unconditional support was gone. She was truly alone now, left to face the storm she'd created. The end was drawing closer. All that was left was to finalize the divorce and walk away for good. A week later, Rebecca and I sat across from each other in the cold, sterile office of my divorce attorney. She looked nothing like the confident, radiant woman who had charmed everyone she met. Her face was pale, her eyes sunken, and her hands trembled slightly as she held the pen. She didn't say much, and neither did I. There was no point. The evidence was overwhelming, and even her own attorney had advised her to sign without a fight. The alternative, a court battle with the fraud charges looming, would have left her with even less. My attorney slid the papers across the table. "Ms. Miller, these documents finalize the divorce. You're relinquishing any claim to Adam's assets, including the house. In exchange, we're waiving the right to pursue further damages related to your actions. Do you understand?" Rebecca nodded stiffly, her voice barely audible. "I understand." "Then sign here." She hesitated for a moment, her eyes flicking up to meet mine. "Adam," she began, her voice cracking. I held up a hand, cutting her off. "Don't. There's nothing left to say." Her shoulders sagged, and she pressed the pen to the paper, signing her name with shaking hands. When it was done, my attorney took the papers and nodded. "That's it. The divorce is finalized. Rebecca stared at the table, her expression blank. For a moment, I felt a flicker of pity, but it was quickly replaced by relief. This was the closure I needed. As I stood to leave, Rebecca finally spoke. "I never wanted it to end like this," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I thought I could fix it." I looked at her, my voice firm but calm. "You had a chance to fix it, Rebecca. You had plenty of chances. But you made your choices. And now you have to live with them." With that, I walked out of the room, leaving her behind for good. As I stepped into the sunlight outside the office, I took a deep breath, feeling a weight lift from my chest. For the first time in months, I felt free. But there was still one last move to make. The final act in a story that would ensure I never had to look back. With the divorce finalized, I turned my focus to tying up the last loose end, making sure Rebecca and Philip's fall from grace was permanent. The financial investigation into their embezzlement was already underway. I had made sure the authorities had everything they needed: bank statements, fake invoices, and email evidence. But I wanted to ensure their public humiliation extended beyond the headlines. Using my tech skills, I created an anonymous blog titled Hopeworks Uncovered. The posts were methodical and damning, detailing the timeline of their affair, the financial misdeeds, and the betrayal of the community they claimed to serve. Each post was accompanied by receipts, emails, and photos, ensuring there was no room for denial. The blog gained traction within days. News outlets picked it up, donors who had been defrauded began filing complaints, and even former employees started coming forward with stories of their own. Philip was arrested within a week, his smug face replaced by a mugshot splashed across every news channel. As for Rebecca, she lost everything. Her career was unsalvageable, her reputation in ruins. The once glamorous woman who had betrayed me now lived in her parents' guest room, a shadow of her former self. I, on the other hand, started to rebuild. I sold the house where her lies had taken root, and moved to a new city to start fresh. The memories of Rebecca and Philip no longer haunted me. They were lessons etched into my past, reminders of the strength I'd found in myself. One evening, months later, I received an email from an anonymous account. "You won, Adam. I lost everything. I hope you're happy." I stared at the screen for a moment, then deleted the message without responding. I wasn't happy. Revenge wasn't about happiness, it was about justice. And justice had been served. For the first time in a long time, I felt at peace. I was finally free to move forward, unburdened by betrayal, lies, or regret. And as I closed my laptop, I knew one thing for sure. I would never let anyone take me for a fool again.